Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today the subject of my lecture is binding theory. We discuss the basics of binding theory and we discuss what is A, C commands B, and we also discuss some other things like antecedent, like anaphora, etc. So we discuss these things, but we will make our basis again that would be useful for the binding theory, and we will discuss the definition and the or you can say the main points of the binding theory in this lecture, and in the next lecture we will discuss the principles of binding theory. Today let's see what is binding theory. Binding is a distribution of anaphoric elements, pronouns, etc. So we can say, if somebody asks you what is binding theory, you can say that it is a kind of distribution of anaphoric elements. What are anaphoric elements? Anaphoric elements can be pronouns, that is he, she, it, him, her, their, etc. And it can be reflexive like each other, yourself, myself, etc. Right? Pronouns, reflexive pronoun can also fall under the category of pronouns, right? So we can say that it is a distribution of anaphoric elements. So anaphoric elements will include pronouns, and it will also include sometimes reflexives. It will also include uh, the words like each other, one another, etc. The second point is a pronoun, a bindee, usually has an antecedent, a binder. So whenever you see a pronoun in a sentence or in a clause or a phrase, a pronoun can also be called as bindee. So you will usually see that it always has, or it usually has, an antecedent, a binder in a sentence. You can say that a binder will always or usually bind a bindee or bind a pronoun in the sentence, right? We have also discussed the example in the previous lecture. We will also discuss the example of this point in this lecture as well. The theory identifies the syntactic relationship that can or must hold between a given pronoun, a noun, and its antecedent. So we can say that this theory, it somehow or somewhat identifies some sort of syntactic relationship, and which can or must hold between a given pronoun, noun, and its antecedent. So this theory has some sort of syntactic relationship between its pronouns or nouns and its antecedents. So let us look at an example here. Tom hurts himself. Here, Tom is an antecedent in the sentence. Let me open the draw box as well. So here, this Tom is antecedent, all right, because it binds its bindee, that is pronoun, right? You can also call it reflexive, himself, etc., because they are known as reflexive pronoun, himself, herself, ourselves, yourself, etc. So what is the function? So what does Tom do here? Tom is an antecedent which binds its reflexive or anaphora, right? Or you can also say that pronoun. So this Tom binds himself here. So that's why I named it X, and I also named it X here, because they both are binding each other. They are related to each other, right? But what happens in this sentence? Tom hurts him. So we don't know who is him here, whether it is whether this is Tom himself, or this him is somebody else. So we termed this as X. We also termed as X, but we also wrote Y, because we don't know, it can, this him can be someone else, right? So this Tom here binds and also do not bind this him, because this him can also be Tom, can Tom himself, and this can also be somebody else, right? There are three terms which will be incessantly used in this binding theory. First one is R expression. So what are R expressions? An NP, or a noun phrase that gets its meaning by referring to an entity in the world. So this R expression is such an expression, or this is such an NP or such a noun phrase which gets its meaning by referring but this the word by referring the point by referring the noun to an entity in the external world, right? For example, if we have an example of Imran Khan, so what will happen here? you will see that this NP, this and our Imran Khan words suggest something like this, right? He could be a man, etc. Of course, so this is referring to an entity in the world. So we get this meaning by referring to an entity into the world. So this Imran Khan refers to a person like this, right? So this is teddy bear. So you can again draw this somehow like this one. Okay? So this teddy bear again refers to an entity in the external world. So if we the third example is brown shoes. So again, the brown shoes here refer to an entity, external entity in the world. So it can be something like this, shoes, etc. So all these noun phrases, they are referring to different entities in the world. So they are getting their meaning by referring to different entities in the external world. So next point, this is anaphors. So what are anaphors? Noun phrases that obligatorily gets its meaning from another NP in the sentence. So such noun phrases which obligatorily gets meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence are known as anaphors. For example, here we have himself, herself, yourself, etc. You can include all these reflexives or anaphors as an example here. So Tom loves himself. So here Tom is, as we already discussed, this is an antecedent, right? I will name it as A. So this himself is anaphor. So this anaphor, this obligatorily or obligate, you can say that this anaphor obligatorily gets its meaning from this NP. I'm using this word obligatorily, and I also underline this because this is important here, that all the time, every time these noun phrases, they will get their meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence, right? So it is must, it is important. So they are bound by this rule, these noun phrases. For example, here himself, here himself will get its meaning from its antecedent, right? From its binder. So himself is bindy, or it can also be called as anaphors. So it can also be termed as pronoun. So it gets its meaning from Tom, right? So Tom is kind of binding it himself here. So the word obligatorily is important here because noun phrases obligatorily will get their meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence in the case of anaphors. But in the case of pronoun, it will be a different thing. Here I am using the word may, right? So here I use the word obligatorily because it was bound. The here anaphors were bound to get their meaning from their antecedent, but here they are not bound. So that's why I use the word may. So third point in the binding theory, or the third, you can say, basic point of this theory is pronoun. So here, what happens with the pronoun in this theory are in the syntax. An NP that may gets its meaning from another NP in the sentence. So here in the case of pronoun, we use may. So we can say that this is such a noun phrase which may or may not get its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence. Whereas in this case, it was obligatorily important, right? It was obligatory for the anaphor to get its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence, like Tom, right? But in these cases, let's look at an example here. Ali said that he played chess. And in the second example, Ali said that Ali played chess. So from the first example, we extracted two other examples, two more examples. So from the first example, we have these two meanings. Let me switch on the drawing board here. Yes. So this is first example. Ali said that he played chess. This is our principal example. From this example, we got these two more examples, right? We extracted two more examples from this one. So Ali said that he played chess could meaning could be tantamount to this thing. Ali said that Ali played chess, so this he can also this can refer to Ali himself, and this can also mean Ali said that someone else played chess. So this he can also be Ali, and this can also be someone else. So that's why I just wrote this one. So here in the place of someone else, there can be other name. It can also be Tom. It can also be another name Bill, it can also be John, etc. So we can say that this noun phrase, in the sentence is may or may not gets. It may gets its meaning from another noun phrase like this one, right? So it may gets its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence, and this noun phrase uh, may not get its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence, right? So this could have been Ali and it could have been someone else as well. So this is about pronouns in the case of binding theory or in the case of syntax. So this is the main difference between the or expression and the pronouns. That is, you can say that here we use may, so they may get its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence, and where in this case it obligatorily gets its meaning from another noun phrase in the sentence. So let's look at some other terms: antecedent and indexing. In this antecedent, which we have already discussed, but I'm giving you some more examples on antecedent. An NP that gives its meaning to a pronoun or anaphor. So this is such a noun phrase which gives its meaning to another noun phrase in the sentence, or to a noun, or to a pronoun or anaphor in a sentence. For example, here Melissa punches herself for rebuking him. In this sentence, this Melissa is an MP or antecedent, and it's give its meaning to another noun phrase in the sentence, to herself, right? So antecedent is giving its meaning to an anaphor in the sentence. For rebuking him, so Melissa is not giving its meaning to this noun here, because she is directly affecting this noun phrase or this anaphor here in the sentence. So Melissa is antecedent and herself is anaphor. And in this case, and indexing is another example, another term in this theory. Let's look at indexing. Each index, plural indices, represents a different index. So each index in a sentence, a phrase, or a clause, it represents a different index, right? And so they are kind of NP, and all the NPs in the sentence, they belong to a different index. So here, for example, in this sentence, first of all, we have Tom, and then we have he, and then the dog. So they are all indices in the sentence, right? So they are, and each indices is different in the sentence: Tom, he, in the dog, etc. So they represents a different indices in the sentence. So let's move towards another page. So this is co-index or co-indexation. What is co-index or co-indexation in the binding theory? Two NPs are co-indexed if they have the same index. So two noun phrases will be co-indexed in the sentence or phrase or clause if and only if they have the same index. For example, in this case, Bill hates himself for hurting her. So what happens here? So first of all, this is index. Let's look at index here. Bill is index, himself is index, her is index. So how can two NPs be co-indexed in the sentence? If they have the same index, of course. So look at this. This Bill is antecedent and this himself is anaphor. So anaphor, look at this. I use X for this and X for this because they were co-indexing this each other. For example, Bill hates himself. So Bill is directly co-indexing this himself. So because this himself referred to Bill, right? So let's move next. So Bill hates himself for hurting her. So is this her is referring to Bill? No, it is not. So is this himself is referring to Bill? Yes, this himself is referring to Bill. So that's why we can say that they both NPs are co-indexed. For example, X and X, I use X and X because they were showing indexation. But whereas Y, I use Y for this because this is not directly related to the Bill, right? So it can be someone else. But so her is not directly related to Bill. So we can say that her is not related to them, or her is not co-indexed, but Bill and himself are co-indexed in the sentence. Here we go. So this is binding theory after all. we have paved, we have you can say uh, built our basis for the binding theory. We have discussed so many terms and technical terms which can be used in this binding theory. So now is the time to discuss the binding theory, or you can say to discuss the definition of binding theory. So this is definition in a way. A binds B. When does A binds B? A binds B if and only if A and B are co-index, and the second point is if A C commands B. So we have already discussed what is A C commands B or what is C command concept in the previous lecture. You can check it on the YouTube as well, on the Google Classroom as well, right? A and B are co-index, first point, and second is A C commands B. So let's see when A and B are co-index. We have already discussed the example of co-indexation. So how co-indexation work in a sentence or phrase clause. So let us look an example here. So this is an example. So I just drew a tree diagram of the sentence here. So first of all, the sentence is Tom hurt himself. This is a sentence here, and let me switch it on. Tom hurt himself, and first of all, TP and IP, I use the term for the sentence. TP is tense phrase and IP is inflection phrase. They both are kind of similar. They are the same things. So IP I discussed this from the book How to Study Linguistics. So you can check this concept there as well. It is used there in X bar theory. That is IP, and TP is they are more or less they are same thing. So first of all, I divide the sentence into two branches. First, you have DP or NP. DP is determiner phrase or NP is noun phrase. So this noun phrase comes under the umbrella of DP. So I will usually use DP for the NP, right? Major term is DP and the minor term is NP because noun phrase comes under the umbrella of DP or the noun determiner phrase. So second one is uh, in I bar or T bar, that is tense bar or this inflection bar. So I divided the sentence. This division or this diagram is regarding the principles used in the X bar theory, right? Or we also discussed in the book, and I will also repeat this X bar theory in the next lectures as well, in the next 2 or 3 lectures. So further, under the DP or NP, you have Tom. I I draw this triangle because you can assume that if you have the or determiner and something else in the DP or noun phrase, they are sitting in this triangle. So I simply draw this. I do not draw like 2 3 branches for different things for different words. So simply I wrote Tom here for under DP or NP, and I drew this triangle. So from T bar I bar we have T and we have VP, that is verb phrase. So what is T? T is tense, right? So it can be present or past tense. It can be a modal auxiliary in the sentence. So whenever you draw a tree diagram for a sentence, you normally draw this line as well. Although you do not always use modal auxiliaries, etc., different forms, or but if you do not have different verbs which are required at this place, you keep the place vacant or empty here, but you usually draw it just for the sake of uh, fulfilling the requirements. So from T bar or I bar we have T and VP, and under the VP we again have DP, determine phrase, and V bar, because first of all we draw we according to X bar theory we write VP or NP etc, and then we go to the V bar level, and then from V bar level, under the V bar level or under the verb phrase we have V, that is verb, and DP, that is noun phrase or determiner phrase. So under this VP we do not have any DP, so we kept it empty, and under this V bar we have verb, and verb is heard in the sentence, and DP does mean another noun phrase or determinate phrase in the sentences himself. So this was you can say the explanation of the diagram. So let us see whether A co-index B or not. So because these, in this case, Tom is A and himself is B. So we can say that this Tom hurt himself. In this case, himself is directly related to Tom. So we can say that this A binds B, right? So it fulfills the first, the first condition of binding theory. So this Tom co-index or show co-indexation in the case of himself here. So first condition has been fulfilled. Yes, co-indexation is applicable here, right? So what does what about C command? You also discussed. We also discussed the concept of C command in the previous lecture. So Tom here, Tom has this branch. So in the case of C command, what do? You go one step up and then all the way downward. So here A C commands or Tom C commands this T VP DP VBOR V etc etc. So this Tom or himself as well. So we can say that Tom also C commands himself a DP as well. So C command is also applicable in this uh, example. This is another example of this binding theory. First one is Tom's father hurt himself. Tom's father hurt himself the same. So in this first example, we are considering this Tom's as a noun, as the main noun, or you can say as a subject here. And in the second example, we are considering this Tom's father. You will see that this Tom's father, this example will be considered as correct according to binding theory, and this will be incorrect. Why? Because in this, we are just taking only Tom as a subject. So I use this X because it will co-index. Sorry, I forgot to write X here. So this is also X because it is co-indexing himself as well, and it is also C commanding himself as well. Whereas Tom is not doing the same with himself. So let us see here. Let's look an example. TP, tense phrase I use, then DP and T bar the same. So under the D bar you have DP, that is determinative phrase, and then you go to the D bar level, right? So under the D bar level, first of all you see this D derivation, or you can say this is or inflection, and then you have also NP. So normally NP comes under the umbrella of DP, so that's why I use DP. Then under the DP, of course, you have another determinate phrase, right? That is Tom, and then we go to the D bar, and under D bar level you have D and NP. This phenomena is actually discussed in the X bar theory, which also I have already discussed, and I will again keep in mind, I will again discuss in the next few lectures. So, and on the right hand side of the diagram, we have T bar, or you can also say that I bar, and then we have T, that is past tense, and for past tense, we normally use this sign past, and for the present tense, you normally use this minus sign, and then T and VP, under VP, we have this DP, and again V bar, and etc. So, hurt and himself. So, can we say that this Tom's father co-index himself? So if we look at only Tom, if we look at Tom, so in the case of co-indexing, if we go upward, then if we go downward, so we can only go upward one step up. So we cannot say that it is co-indexing or C commanding himself, right? So because we cannot go two step up in the case in these X bar theory and binding theory, right? So we can move only one node up. So after moving one node up, you can move all the way down, right? So in this case, we cannot say that it is C commanding himself or co-indexing himself. So, but if we consider Tom's father as a whole, a subject or a noun phrase, so what will happen then? So this Tom's father can come under the category or under this node DP, then go one step up, NP, then all the way down. So all the other things come under this DP. So we can say that this Tom's father also co-index himself, and it also C commands himself as well. So these were the examples of binding theory. I hope you understood the concept. If you still have some question, please do comment. Do ask in the comment below. Thank you very much.